That was my other
So
team to mention to you is how does this affect the Bengals with T. Higgins sitting there on a franchise tag saying,
yeah.
I want out. And Jamar Chase is first in line to get paid there, with all due respect to T. Higgins, who can probably sit here and say, hey, you send me to another team and I'm getting in the neighborhood of at least what what Waddle's making and what,
Right. At
Devontae
least,
Smith is
yeah.
asking for. Like, he can get in that neighborhood, but the Bengals do have that hammer of being able to say, hey, I've got you on a franchise tag. Let me deal with Jamar Chase. Let's all win a Super Bowl this year.
So I
You
think
know?
so at the beginning of the offseason, Rich, like I think we all had like a T. Higgins trade on our radar, right? Like the same way we had like maybe an Aiyuk trade on our radar, like that, just one of those things where you look at the way the team's set up and you're like, okay, like maybe this is at least going to elicit some phone calls from some teams to the Bengals to see if they can pry T. Higgins free. And right around the combine, I talked to somebody pretty high up in Cincinnati who basically made the point to me, no, we're going for it this year.
Yeah.
Like we are really all in on trying to win a Super Bowl this year. And we're going to do what it takes. We're going to do everything we need to do to try to win a Super Bowl. And we want T. Higgins to be a part of that. He's an important part of it, right? Like I think they probably feel the same way about Trey Hendrickson, who, rattled cages about his contract, a few weeks back because of where the edge rusher market has gone. So, I think the road here for them is that it'd be really, really difficult to have Burrow and Chase and Higgins together, right? Like for the next 5 years. That would probably cost you, if you add all of it up, what? Like $110 million dollars at least, maybe more than that, maybe $120 million per year to have all three of those guys who all play in one phase of the game together. So if the reality is that, you're going to be leaning on guys like Jermaine Burton, their third round pick coming up to replace Higgins, and you're going to want to try to re-sign Chase, I think, the move right now would be what can we do to make T. Higgins happy this year? And can we put a sweetener in his contract? Is there something that we can do to make him whole this year? And, like I think that's probably the route they go. And I think that maybe you do that before you sign Chase. And you say, okay, like we're going to give T. Higgins something that's going to entice him to come in and be all in with us for this year. And maybe it means you promise you don't franchise him this year in 2025, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's what it takes. But you do something to get him in, and then you sign Chase, and now you've got kind of full Voltron on that side of the ball. But it's a tricky situation, certainly, and I do think like ultimately, the end result of all of this is that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are together long term, and T Higgins is probably somewhere else in 2025.
Right. But if you can try and, as you say, full Voltron, go into the season one last time, with Higgins and Chase and Burrow, you can. Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. And that does bring me to the 49ers and what their situation is with Aiyuk now that Jefferson's been paid and these other ones are out there, as we mentioned, with Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb and what Brandon Aiyuk is looking for. And, that's why, it made no sense. Let's trade Aiyuk before the draft. You got Debo here, and if Aiyuk goes and makes a big deal, then maybe Debo goes. Like, why wouldn't the Niners go full Voltron with the kid they drafted out of Florida in the first round and say, let's try and win one currently right now, knowing that this is the last season they're probably going to have Purdy on the deal that they have him on, or that day is coming. So why would the Niners trade anybody between now and the season?
I do think they've done such a good job drafting and developing. They've been dealing with the last 5 years or so, like this just bottleneck of contracts at the top of their books, right? Like so. It's, I think, sort of similar to what they were facing. I think it was 4 years ago now, where they had DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead, who brought a lot of the same things to the table. Were both excellent players, and they viewed Eric Armstead as being more signable, right? Like so they do a long-term deal for Eric Armstead, and as much as they hated to do it because he's a great, great player, they trade DeForest Buckner, who is a captain for them, who does all the right things, because they could get value back for him. So I think that's sort of the way they view this. Um, I I think given their druthers, this is just me talking.
Yep.
I think they would keep Brandon Ayuk over Debo Samuel. And I think it's because Brandon Ayuk is more of a traditional number one receiver who can beat man coverage, who you can build an offense around. Deebo Samuel is great. He can do a million different things, right? But at this point, is he a little bit more of a luxury? And I wouldn't ignore getting Christian McCaffrey out of the way too, getting that taken care of because that was hovering over them. Not a lot of people know this, but that's been hovering over them for months now. Like the McCaffrey, based on where pay for skill players has gone, wanted a little bump. He's got his, that's taken care of now. So I think they try like hell to re-sign Brandon Ayuk in the coming weeks and see if they can find some sort of middle ground. And obviously, the price tag on that has gone up and Brandon Ayuk is going to benefit from having waited. Um, and if they can get something done, great. Then I think they get some phone calls on Debo. And if the phone calls come in on Debo, there's something they really love out there, fine. If not, they wait a year and trade him after the year. I don't think both those guys are going to be on the team long term. But I do think that their futures with the Niners are relative to one another, and really kind of center on the way the IU contract negotiation goes. But I do think that like if it were up to Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, ideally I think they'd like to have Ayuk on their roster long term, and if that means trading Debo, then I think that they'd be okay with that.
Even in the season, right? I mean, unless Debo makes
Yeah,
it
I don't know about in the
uncomfortable,
season.
like that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, go for it this year. Like, this is why would you break up
It's
any of your top
I think it depends
talent
on what
like
you can
that?
get for him, though.
If you can
right? Like, I
figure
think
it
does
into the
depend.
cap, really? I mean,
I think it does depend on what you can get for him, though. Like if somebody's offering a first round pick for him, now you're talking about something a little bit different, right? Like if the Jets were to offer a first round pick for Debo, who obviously knows Robert Saleh, um, would you and that is the Jets going all in on it. Like if you're the Niners, you look at it and say, okay, like well, we've got Ricky Pearsall here. We have Juwan Jennings coming back. He's signed
he
through
was terrific. He could
2025.
have been the MVP of the Super Bowl.
Right, and who has a chance to be a good player, and I think that was a savvy move by the Niners to hold on to him.
Right.
And now you have Ayuk as a true number one. And oh, by the way, you got to factor George Kittle in this equation. I know he's gotten older, but he's still a really good player, and Travis Kelce has shown us how tight ends can last. Um, I just I think that there is a scenario where somebody could pry Debo Samuel from the Niners. Again, that's just my opinion.
Sure.
But if somebody comes along and offers a first round pick and you're the Niners, right? And again, you're dealing with this perpetual bottleneck of contracts that's only going to get worse after Brock Purdy gets paid. You're getting offered a first round pick. Part of the equation has to be that means we can get a really good player on our roster at cost control, for 4 or 5 years. And that'll help us manage the numbers at the top of our cap sheets. So I think it's a complex situation that I think could go a number of different ways. And certainly if I'm a team like the Jets and I see Brandon Ayuk has been re-signed to a contract at whatever $30 million per year, I'm probably picking up the phone and calling John Lynch.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.